Yo, what up, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka Bangers, aka I'm back with the biggest and best breakdown on the Pokemon tournament scene of all time. All right, maybe not all time, but up to this point, the data that we have been seeing on Limitless is kind of screwy, and in this video, I unpack it and give you exclusive details on the current metagame for almost every single top deck that was played this past weekend. So let's get right to the data and let's get right to the tournaments that I will be talking about. So diving into the data, I choose to go on Limitless TCG.com. Obviously everybody pretty much knows that, but basically what you're going to do right here is you're going to go ahead and use the filters, and we're taking a look at the three biggest tournaments of this past weekend. Each of these tournaments had at least 500 people. So 500 people, 800 people, and over 1,000 people. Okay, so all of these data points are going to be combined into one video, and I've got thousands of games and data that I'm going to give you that you won't see anywhere else. Let's just be honest. Nobody else is doing what I am doing in this video. So starting with Ursi's tournament, this is the biggest tournament in Pokemon Pocket right now. And obviously, shout out to Ursi. Love what she's doing for the game. But let's go ahead and talk about the result here. In the grand finals, it was a Arcazard deck versus a Mewtwo and Gardevoir deck, and the Arcazard came out on top. Now, what was really interesting about this is there were only 4 Arcazard decks in the top 32, and one managed to make it all the way to the end and win it. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what did the metagame look like? Well, this is a little bit of a breakdown on the metagame. The biggest things that you'll notice is obviously Mewtwo continues to be the most played deck in this tournament, and you'll probably see a trend with that as well. But when you take a look at the Pikachu variants, again, you got to add those Pikachu variants up, and then you're going to end up getting around the second most popular deck when you add them all up. And then the Charizard Arcanine variant, okay, again, we call it Arcazard. There's all sorts of names for it. That's kind of the name that most of us have settled on just to kind of get it out there, even though Moltres carries most of the deck. It's not even in the name. We're not even going to talk about that right now. But anyways, so again, about 11% of the meta was Arcazard. And then when you talk about Charizard, just, Zard and Moltres, that variant, that made up about 6%. Now, there were some sneaky water decks that performed this weekend. I have those broken down too. So there's going to be 2 variants that I'll talk about, and there's a third variant, but there's not too much data on it because not as many people are playing it. That's the Starmie EX and Greninja variant. So I've done on my power rankings. Obviously, check that out. My power rankings have been pretty spot on with the meta in terms of the best deck. I said that Arcazard was the best deck. Make sure you check out that video if you haven't. But I said Arcazard was the best deck at this moment going into the weekend, and it won 2 of these 3 events. So just kind of throwing that out there. Starmie EX and Greninja. One thing that I'll point out about that deck really quickly is that the most successful builds seem to be incorporating low normal type energies, so low attack cost normal Pokemon. So in other words, Kangaskhan is in one of the most best performing lists with Starmie EX and Greninja. So keep that in mind if you try that deck out. The other 2 water variants were Starmie EX and Articuno EX, and then Articuno EX and Greninja. Okay, so keep those in mind because you're going to see those pop up again. So heading to the Pocket Legends League, which, by the way, check the description. I leave the link to their Discord in there. They do a lot of different tournaments in terms of, 2 tournaments. One is usually a rules-based tournament on Wednesdays, and then one on the weekends is kind of the open, everyone kind of knows that format. It's the regular base format. In this tournament, Arcazard played in the grand finals, and it was a mirror match. Okay, so for the first weekend where this deck is really well known, and it's not a secret anymore, Arcazard swept Ursi and the Pocket Legends tournament. The only other decks that have done that have been Mewtwo and Pikachu. So that just kind of tells you the power level of this deck, okay? But again, Arcazard wins, so that's the second event out of the 3 that it wins. And then when you take a look at the meta breakdown, again, you can see about 29% Mewtwo and Gardevoir, and then you see about 11% Arcazard. And then when you add up all the Pikachu variants, you're looking at what, roughly 16% of the meta there. So that's the second most popular deck. And then you see Charizard and Moltres still getting played in this tournament as well. Now, if you go down a little bit, you can notice there's the Starmie EX and the Articuno EX. Now, what's interesting about this tournament, and obviously there's an Articuno EX and Greninja, and then Starmie EX and Greninja here. What's interesting about this is the tournament that was, earlier. So this is before the Ursi, and this is before the third tournament that I covered. But there's less water in this tournament than there are in the other tournament. So keep that in mind as well. But let's get to the Pikaverse Tournament. So the Pikaverse Tournament, starting to pop off. There's a lot of people in here. I think there was like 800 people plus in this tournament. And the crazy thing is, obviously Arcazard's presence in the finals again. So it made the finals of all three of these tournaments, and it won 2 out of the 3. And the winning deck in this tournament was a Pikachu and Electrode variant. Now, if you watch my power rankings, again, just kind of echoing the if you want to stay on top of the game, if you want to have, access to some of the best data that's out here on YouTube, definitely make sure you hit that subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. You can click my logo, and make sure you check out my power rankings that I release every week. I try to release them Friday at the very latest. This past weekend, I'll release it like early Saturday morning. But again, I said that the Electrode variant was, in my opinion, probably the best variant to go up against Arcazard. Now, in the previous weeks, I've said that Raichu variant is probably the best Pikachu variant. But again, as we saw Arcazard pop up, I do like the early damage that the Electrode variant can do to Arcazard. So that's one thing to kind of look at. But again, the Electrode variant was the only Pikachu variant out of these 3 tournaments to win and get into the finals. So that's kind of a big deal. Now, is the Electrode variant the best variant of Pikachu right now? I mean, we'll get to the data and talk about that a little bit more. The meta breakdown for this is Mewtwo continues to be the most played decks in all of these giant tournaments. And then again, Arcazard, you see it at about 9%. You see Charizard and Moltres at about 6%. But if you combine the Pikachu variants, again, you're looking at roughly 15 to 16% of the meta there. Okay. Now, the interesting part about this too is you can notice that there's an Articuno EX Greninja and there's Starmie EX Articuno as well. So again, those 2 water decks popped up over and over again after the Pocket Legends tournament was concluded. Okay, so you're going to see a lot of water, especially with Arcazard doing what it's doing right now, and Pikachu, not necessarily falling off a cliff, but it's definitely trending a little bit down in terms of the number of players that are bringing Pikachu to these bigger tournaments. One thing I do want to point out, and I haven't gotten a chance to confirm this or not, but I did want to get a deck profile kind of, tidbit from the person that finished top 4 with Starmie and Greninja. So this is the water deck that I actually am a fan of. This is personally the best water deck in my opinion, because it doesn't necessarily depend on the Misty, but the Misty can be something that, water decks, probably should be playing. But again, in this water deck, they chose to use Kangaskhan as kind of that early game pressure, and then 2 Staryu, 2 Froakie, and then you'll notice no red card, but they did run double potion and no Giovanni. So I'm trying to get in touch with this person that they reached out on Twitter so I can get ask them some more questions about this deck. But again, it's kind of a variant of that Ninja Stars deck list that we've seen. But this is one of the coolest things. Again, water decks got top 4 in a couple events, so that's a pretty big deal, especially because Pikachu had been holding it down so long. So let's actually get down to the nitty gritty. Let me get to the numbers part of this weekend. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I want to leave it on the screen just in case you want to screenshot it and then be able to kind of look at it later. I've actually got it kind of summarized a little bit more, but let me just point out a couple details about some of the statistics that I dove into. So first of all, Pikachu and Zebstrika, what you're seeing is about 60% of the top players in the Ursi Tournament didn't play red card. And then when you talk about the Pocket Legends, the top 3 players played red card, and then the Pikaverse, 4 out of the 5 top players played red card. So what I'm trying to say there is there's a little bit of variance there on whether or not the Zebstrika variants bring red card. But when you talk about something like Electrode, the Electrode variant, you start to see a lot, pretty much the same thing with players bringing red card. Now you'll notice in the Pocket Legends League that the Electrode variant didn't do very well at all. In fact, it was really bad. And so I didn't even look at the players that brought red card for that one. That's why you don't see that data. But again, for Zebstrika and for Electrode, a lot of players choose to bring red card. Here's the flip side of that. The Raichu variant, most players do not bring red card. And that's just like a space issue, right? That's because they're playing stuff like Lieutenant Surge, right? So again, the Raichu variant tends not to bring red card. And again, when you take a look at the other decks, like Arcazard, you can see the win percentages and whatnot. And then just going down to the notes part, because I'm going to break down the numbers in the next part of this video here. But for Starmie Articuno, almost every player is bringing red card. Okay, there's some exceptions. Like, for example, one person in Ursi's tournament was playing like a Pidgeot Starmie Articuno list, and they didn't bring red card, but most players that are playing Starmie and Articuno are bringing red card. Okay, and so, you know, that's one of the best performing decks right now, and people are choosing to play red card. So I know that there's a lot of debate still about red card, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to dive into that. That's a whole nother video. But again, just kind of giving you the details. And then the last detail I'll go over before I get to the specific data that you're going to get nowhere else, just on my channel, is that for Articuno and Greninja, again, most players are bringing red card. So for the water decks, if you're playing water, you're most likely bringing red card. But let's get to the exclusive part of the video right now. Okay, so let's talk about the exclusive part of this video. So what I started noticing is when you go to Limitless, there's some data that's very skewed, okay? And so what I mean by skewed is some of these tournaments, they are factoring in ties, right? And they're factoring in like the drops as losses into the win percentage. And so let me just kind of run through some of these numbers, for example. So one of the biggest discrepancies, we'll start at the very top, and you can screenshot this and kind of have it for yourself as well. So that way you can kind of go ahead and take a look at this. You can pause the video, whatever you need to do. But for example, in the Ursi tournament, the data will tell you on Limitless that there's a 49.25 win percentage for Zebstrika variant. However, when you take out the games, like the ties and the games that were just like no-shows, it actually drops to 46.32%, okay? Now, on the flip side of that, okay, if you go to something like the Pikaverse Tournament, okay, and for the same deck list, the Limitless data will tell you 51.43% as the win percentage. But when you take out the extra games that just shouldn't even be included because they're no-shows, it pops up to 57.66%. Okay, so that is drastically different, and that's one of the reasons why me going through this data for you, so that way you can kind of take in this real data instead of, you know, people making, you know, assumptions on data that's wrong. You're actually getting the best data that we have right now. These are thousands of games when you add them up together. So again, I just kind of wanted to take time to explain that. And then again, you can go through and screenshot this and check this out on your own. But I want to give you some overall numbers, okay? So if you go to the right side of the screen here where it says overall, I'm going to give you some of these numbers, and then we'll talk about these numbers as well at the very bottom of the screen right next to me, okay? So for example, for this weekend, okay, there were 806 games played with the Zebstrika variant, and it had a win percentage of 54%, okay? Now, when you take a look at the Electrode variant, the Electrode variant had a win percentage of 47.95, right? And that's 488 games of data. Now, here's the asterisk. The asterisk is it's the only Pikachu variant that won a tournament this weekend. So, yeah, take that for what you will. The Raichu variant had the second highest win rate at 51.91%. But again, if you just go ahead and look at the total number of games, I mean, we're talking about, you know, 2,000 games of data. And when you talk about 2,078 total games of Pikachu, it's still having a win percentage of 51.92%. Okay. Now going to Arcazard, which in my opinion is the best deck in the game right now, just because it has, it can take care of almost everything, right? Obviously, the more water pops up, the more that's going to be an issue. But after 1,470 games, it had a win percentage of 55%. That is incredible. Okay, in trading card games, not a lot of people realize this, but in trading card games, if you have a win percentage of like 51 to 52%, that's pretty solid. When you start getting into 55%, when you start getting into 58% and 60%, that's really, really, really good. Okay, so again, Arcazard on the scene, doing really well, very powerful deck. When you talk about just regular Charizard with Moltres, 858 games, 51.63%. So, hey, that's about on par with some, with some other top decks, and you can see why it's kind of floating towards the top. It's a little bit lower than Pikachu overall. Then you get into the Mewtwo and Gardevoir. Again, the deck that is being played the most across all tournaments, and when you actually look at the data, it's got just over 50% win rate. Okay, after 3,874 games from these tournaments, it's got a 50.93% win percentage. Okay, that's the lowest on the list outside of the Pikachu Electrode variant, right? Then when you take a look at the Starmie Articuno list, 389 games. So this is going to be one of these smaller pieces of data, but it boasts 27% win rate. Lastly, the Articuno Greninja deck type, it's going to have 448 games with 56.7 win percentage. So when you take a look at that, it seems like they're the two lowest sample size roughly, right? The two lowest sample size do have some of the highest win rates, right? Highest win rates. However, the one deck that really, in my opinion, stands out is that Arcazard, boasting 1,400 plus games in these three tournaments combined with a win percentage of 55%. So again, take that for what you will, but these numbers are exclusive. You have to dig through the numbers. You have to go through the matchups. You have to really try to go ahead and dig to get these numbers, so that way the win percentages actually make sense. So I hope you guys enjoyed the data breakdown. I hope you guys enjoyed the little tidbits of information, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Stay tuned to the end in the next few seconds, because there's going to be some more videos like my power ranking from this past weekend that will be popping up, and you should definitely check them out. Peace.